and dangerous Yogi Berra. The big RBI man is up there. Squat milk catcher.
And the pitch comes to Yogi Berra. Swings, right center field, and ball is going deep, and it is going to go for a home run.
It is card number 121 from the 1953 Bum Color set. It's Yogi Berra, of course, hanging out in the dugout. And this is kind of part of a two-part series in this set, if you know what I'm talking about. There's another card that was probably, photograph was probably taken around the same time with two other gentlemen from this team. This is actually just, I was looking this up earlier. This card was a corner card on the fourth sheet when this set was printed. It's a high number card, but it also happens to be one of the sheets that had the most printing issues. And, it's one reason why it's hard to find this card in good shape and centered. This one's pretty decent. Love this card. If it's card number 121, it must be session number 121. Of Cardroom Live. Can you guys believe it? Cardroom Live has been going on nearly for 4 years. I just looked it up. Proud of that streak. Pretty good for not a show. This is not a show. It's a hangout for fellow vintage collectors. Whether we have guests or not, most of the time we waste time looking at and talking about old cardboard, and through it all, we try to make it time well wasted. Welcome to my fellow YouTubers. Welcome to the commenters. Welcome to the folks from social media land. If you're new, don't be afraid to say hello. You're amongst cardboard friends. This is the live stream where everybody knows your name. And if we don't, we'll learn it soon enough. If you're listening to this later, you might be going to work or coming home from work or sorting cards, looking at eBay, rolling out those meatballs, walking the dog, sitting on the john, putting the kids to bed. Perhaps you're just realizing that you're hanging on to baseball cards as a distraction to what would otherwise be an existential crisis about the human condition. Shout out to DK Cardboard. You might be wondering if Eddie Wakis will come up. It's possible. I don't know. You might be wondering what other kind of Mike foolery we're going to get into tonight. Whatever you are doing, I hope you get something out of this session. We had a Hall of Famer introduce this session, so I've got high hopes for this session. If you want to get in touch or have ideas, you can email me at bowman53channel@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram, bowman53_Alex, on X, 1953 Bowman Color. And of course, all that information can be found in the description below. This session of Cardroom Live is brought to you by a new sponsor. Not really, but I'm going to make it brought to you by a new sponsor. It's brought to you by Reindeer Studios Etsy store. And here it is, just in case you've never seen it before. Reindeer Studios Etsy store. He's a star seller after all, with over 1,500 sales and counting. Get your hobby-related gear at Reindeer Studios. You can get custom cards that you're not going to find anywhere else. You can find T-shirts that your wife and your regular life friends don't understand, but T-shirts that all your online hobby pals will be envious of. I happen to be wearing one right now. Reindeer Studios has great customer service. I know because I once screwed up an order and he fixed it for me. And if you don't believe me, you can ask a question about that store right now in the chat. And chances are you're probably going to get an answer from the owner himself. How's that for customer service? If Ray Stantz is the heart of the Ghostbusters, Reindeer Studios must be the heart of the hobby. Check out Reindeer Studios store today. And no, I don't get paid for saying any of that. I just decided to say it. So welcome to everybody. Let's do a quick roll call. We have a whole bunch of wrench holders making bad jokes. Hodges 1455 is here. Mike Good is here. Don Field of Dreams. Mike Sports History Collector. Peter B. Oh, what do you know? Clean Cheap Shots is here. Pastor Craig is here. Reindeer Studios. Rick Acosta. Peacemaker Cards. Savoy Special. Jesse Think Blue 77. Mitchell White Sox Fan Card Collector. He's unloading the dishwasher. I might have to add that to the opening. Orlando Collector Dream, Stephen with the PH, Low Grade, No Grade Vintage. Hey, Andrew, I believe your name is Andrew. You need to email me so that we can make arrangements for you to get on another live stream. We tried that once before. It didn't work out, but you should email me. We can figure that out. Mike Polina's here. Larry's here. Diamond Gems 45 is here. Warren D in the CLE. A's fan. Jim, good to see you. Jim. Killer Brew 3 is here, and the list goes on. Yeah, checks in the mail, I'm sure. So let's get into it, guys. 5 minutes in, I try to get through that as quickly as I can. Tonight is another Cards with Stories night. I've got 4 gentlemen waiting in the wings. I'm excited because I get to sit back and look at some beautiful cards with all y'all. I'm just going to be the MC for the evening. I've got 4 collectors here. I asked these guys to pull some cards and tell some stories. I'm going to start bringing some of these guys in. First up is Mr. Drew from Clean Cheap Shots. Drew, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Alex.
You know, when I think of a collector who appreciates the stories and the players behind the cards, Drew's like one of the first people I think of. So, Drew, you've done this once before with us, right?
Yeah, we had 4 soft corners, Joe.
That's right.
Yeah.
So looking forward to getting into this with you again. We've also got Mr. Chris from Missouri. Chris, how are you tonight?
I am great. A little bit tired, but I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you, Chris. And then we have two guys that I'm very excited to have on Cardroom Live for the first time, long-time listeners, first-time callers. First, I want to bring in Mr. Baseball Time Traveler, Rob. Rob, how are you?
Good, Alex. Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Thanks for jumping in. I'm excited because, Rob, you have a fantastic channel where you tell a lot of stories about cards and players, and that's what we're doing tonight. So glad you were able to do it. And then last but not least, not a YouTuber, but definitely a mainstay in the Cardroom Live chat. Reached out to this gentleman and he agreed to come on. Here he is for the first time, Curtis from Let's See Sports Cards. Curtis, how are you?
Nice. Good. How about you? How about yourself?
Doing great. So glad to see you. No, not a YouTuber, but after tonight, if you pay attention to the chat room, you'll probably be barraged with enough people telling you to do it. So regardless, if anybody doesn't know and has Instagram, you should totally look up Let's See Sports Cards. Curtis has a fantastic collection that he's been documenting on Instagram. And we're going to get to see some of his cards tonight. So great group of guys here. I'm going to stop talking and hand it off to Drew. Drew, get us started with a story and a card.
Yeah, I can do that. You know, in Indiana, basketball is a big deal, right? Have you ever heard of the Mr. Basketball Award? You guys heard of that? Right? Okay, so big award. So have you ever wondered where it came from? Well, 1939, George Crowe was the first Mr. Basketball in Indiana, and I'd like to tell you why. So now hold that back up again.
Yeah.
So at 6'2", George Crowe was an outstanding basketball player. His high school didn't have football or baseball teams, but they did have a basketball team, but he didn't play until his junior year because, well, as a new coach, when a new coach asked him why, he said, well, black players weren't allowed to play. So despite some of the players on the team not wanting him to play, the team captain actually pushed for him to be on the varsity team. And so he did have a fantastic senior season, but his team did lose the state championship. And a committee of 5 high school principals picked the tournament's outstanding player. They named a white player from a team that did not make the finals. And so after that, several white sportscasters criticized the choice, and John Whitaker of the Hammond Times there in Indiana wrote, quote, "George Crowe was reminded by 5 little men that his color wasn't right." So soon after, the Indianapolis Star invited their readers to vote for an all-state team for the first time, and George Crowe finished first, and he became Indiana's first Mr. Basketball. I believe that was in 1939. And of course, it's an award that's been given out ever since to the top high school player there. He was a 4-year starter in basketball at Indiana Central College. The Greyhounds won 30 consecutive games and went undefeated during the 1941 and 1942 season. Crowe played first base and outfield on the basketball team, and he also competed in several track and field events. He spent more than a year in Asia as a lieutenant in the 373rd Quartermaster Truck Company. The unit hauled supplies from India to China through the mountain snows and tropical jungles along that Lado and Burma Road. He tried out for the Los Angeles Red Devils, which is a professional touring basketball team, and he made the squad. And also on that team, opposite forward was Jackie Robinson, and also Irv Noren was in the backcourt. Veda Pinson and Bob Gibson gave a lot of credit to George Crowe, who kept him out of trouble, and he stood in the way of trouble so they wouldn't have to. And Tim McCarver gave him credit for changing his life and his game, and Jackie Robinson also gave George Crowe an awful lot of credit for his character. Here's a little trivia for you. George Crowe played 2/3 of an inning in one game at second base in 1958, switching fielding positions with Johnny Temple. Now, still wearing his oversized first baseman's glove, Crowe threw left-handed. When playing any infield position, left-handed is pretty rare. But he did complete a double play. And although the Cubs that day won the contest 4-3, Chicago skipper Bob Sheffing, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, played the game under protest because Crowe had used a non-standard infielder's glove. So Sheffing's protest led to a rule change mandating that first baseman moving to a different defensive position must exchange their mitt for a regulation fielder's glove. A couple more things. Crowe set a record later broken by Jerry Lynch and by subsequently Cliff Johnson for most pinch hit home runs in a Major League Baseball history with 14. After tiring of the nonsense of society, George Crowe became a mountain man for over 30 years before moving in with his daughter in California, and he died in 2011. So that's George Crowe.
Wow. I love that sports writer's comment about the 4 little men.
5, yeah.
Great, fantastic, George Crowe. Chris, let's go to you.
Okay, so I'm gonna break some rules on this one already. But I'm gonna show 2 cards that the cards have the story. But I also want to tell a story about a card, and just remind people that when you there's a story just waiting to be told anytime you're possibly picking up a card. For instance, I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I went to a card show, and I picked up a particular card, a card that I didn't have, and this isn't what I'm going to tell you about, but this is a Johnny Bench, Milton Bradley game. Johnny Bench. Go back to where all 4 of us are right now. I don't want you to keep staring at that, but anyway, I picked up that card after meeting a friend of George Diamond Yard Sport Cards, and by picking up this card, I'm going to remember the conversation that I had with that particular dealer, and then I'm also going to remember the day that I spent getting that card with George Diamond Yard. So I just want everybody to there's a particular story that's waiting to happen, but you just don't know when it might happen. For instance, I got a card signed by Johnny Bench, and that was a fun little story that was been told. But I want to bring up this story here because it's one of my favorite stories, and that this story is about picking up a card. My next story will be about the card, but I'm going to show you a 1956 Mickey Mantle card. And this card is one of my favorite cards, and it's because of the story. About there you go. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I was down at our little vacation spot, and there was an old cantankerous guy that had a card shop there, and he couldn't bring himself to smile, little like Drew every once in a while, just couldn't smile at all, and I worked on him hard. I'd buy a card here or there, and most of the cards in his shop were raw cards. He just didn't trust the grading part. And he had this particular 56 Mantle, and I was in the shop with a young man that I didn't know. And the young guy was maybe 15 or 16 years old at the time, let's say. And I was trying to buy this card from the card shop owner, whose name is Jeff. And Jeff, I'd been in there a couple times, three or four times, but never had seen this card. And there was a young boy looking at this card, a young man looking at this card, and a 1954 Hank Aaron card. And he chose the Hank Aaron card, and he basically put it on layaway. He gave it to the guy, and gave it back to the owner and put down a couple $100 on that Hank Aaron card. And he was going to pay $1,500 for that card, or $2,000. I don't know what it was, but he really wanted this Mickey Mantle. But I told the owner's shop, I said, I will give you $1,000 for that card. And he said, no, he said, I want more than that. And I tell you what, I think it was $800 for the card. But anyway, he wanted more than that. And I said, I'm going to send this off to be graded to make sure it's real. And when I said that, it may have offended him a little bit. What do you mean it's not real? I don't need somebody to slab it, tell me this is real. I know it's real. And I said, yeah, but if you look it up, if it's I was explaining to him about if it's a certain grade, it's worth more. And I told him, I said, listen, if this grades a 1, I'll come back and give you $200 more. And if it grades at least a 1, I said, it's not going to get much higher than that. And finally, after he hemmed and hawed around, and he filled out this contract, and I got it. It's one of my favorite pieces that I have. It's a handwritten contract that he filled out. And basically it says, okay, Chris promises to come in and pay this, if this grades a 1, $200. And we didn't go on if it grades a 2 or grades a 3. We just assumed that's what it was going to grade. And I signed it. The young man witnessed it, so he signed it. Okay. And I'm 2 hours away from there, and I didn't know any of these. I didn't know anybody. And I left with the card and a copy of the signed contract, and the weight of the world on my shoulders to make sure I came back if it graded, a 1. And so I sent it off to be graded. A couple months later, I know the guy was worried that I would never come back in because I sent it off to PSA. And it came back a PSA 3. Well, we never discussed that. We never discussed that. So here I am. I come back in. I go. I can't wait to get back down there. It's a lake property, and can't wait to get back down there anyway and go to this card shop. And it took me a couple months, 3 or 4 months to get down there. And I know that guy was calling me every name in the book and all that kind of stuff under his breath. But when I walked in, I came up to him and I said, well, this isn't part of the contract. But I ended up giving him, I think it's on a piece of paper, I should know. But I think I ended up giving him $500 more. And he was he and I became best friends after that. I mean, really, we were good friends after that because he knew I wasn't coming in. Well, fast forward a little bit. His name's Jeff, and Jeff died of cancer. And I was down there on a day that he really wasn't doing very good. But that young man who I didn't know at all became that signed, that witnessed it and bought the Hank Aaron. He ends up getting engaged to my cousin's daughter. I didn't know. I saw him show up at a family reunion, and I look at him and I say, I know you. And he says, yes. He says, I didn't, he said, I want to buy this Mickey Mantle card. He said, I want to buy that because he said, it means a lot to me. And he doesn't, and he would like to have it in his collection because he saw it for years as he went in that show or store. And I told him, well, if he ends up following through getting married, I'll give it to him or trade it to him, right? And we were at a Thanksgiving dinner, and he brought me over to the side, and he said, when I initially signed that contract and walked out the door, that Jeff looked down at him and said, that son of a bitch, and never be back in this shop ever again. I think so what I say is, if you go in, no matter where you go into, there's a chance that a story is going to be made, and a good story. And, you might make a friend, you might accidentally become lifelong friends with somebody, but there's definitely a story ready to be made. And that's my story.
Right.
I like that.
Love it, Chris. All right, Rob, you're up.
Chris, that's a tough one to follow.
They're all tough.
Alex, I've been watching you probably since late 23, and you were the one. I give you 100% credit for getting me to start a channel.
Great.
So, and virtually every episode, you wonder if there's going to be an Eddie Waitkus sighting.
Oh, there it is.
So I had to get that out of the way. But that's not my card story. I'm going to give you my card story, and it's kind of coincidental because Drew mentioned Irv Noren. And Irv Noren, let me show you the card here, played for the Washington Senators and then was traded to the New York Yankees in 1952 and was a member of the Yankee World Championship teams of 52, 53, 56, and later was a coach for the Oakland Athletics. And he was under the tutelage of Dick Williams, who went to the same high school as Irv. I grew up in Pasadena, and that's why Irv Noren is very important to me. And here's the story. In 1965, I was just getting ready. I had just started to get ready for my first Little League season. And Irv Noren had taken a break from coaching baseball at that time. In fact, he was out of baseball from 1965 to 1969. And he owned a few businesses in Pasadena. He owned a bowling alley or two, and he owned a sporting goods store. And my dad took me to the sporting goods store. And my dad was about the same age as Irv Noren. I think my dad was a couple of years younger. But he and Irv had a great conversation because my dad was from the Bronx. So they chatted and introduced me. And I was able to buy my very first baseball glove and my first set of cleats. And I had my first season in 1965. And I'll always remember that. And Irv actually came to our Little League. We had a father-son meeting, kind of the beginning of the year meeting. And Irv came and was a guest speaker. And I also want to show another card. Drew would appreciate this one from the 1953 set. And it got a grade of a 1 only because there's a little writing on the back. But it's such a beautiful card. And Irv Noren really has a special place in my heart, because not only got to meet him, but he was a local guy. There you go. And and Drew mentioned it, that, in Pasadena, Jackie Robinson went to Pasadena City College and then went to my alma mater, UCLA. Irv went to PCC as well. My brother and one of my sisters went to PCC. So there's a real connection there as far as Pasadena goes. And I think, Drew, you mentioned it, that Jackie Robinson and Irv played on the same minor league basketball team. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
That's
Fantastic.
the story.
Yeah, I love the 53 Tops Noren. It's kind of a one of my favorite commons out of that set. There's a lot of great commons in that set, but great story. All right, Curtis, you're up.
All right. I got Tommy Lasorda.
All right.
And the reason I have Tommy is I grew up in LA, and I went to a lot of Dodger games as a kid. And one of these games, I was with my stepmom and my grandparents, and we were by the dugout. And Tommy was walking from the bullpen down the third baseline, and I was like maybe 5, 6 years old, and I kept on going, Tommy, waving high, what most kids do. And he looks at me and goes, "It's Mr. Lasorda to you."
Wow.
And then gives me and my stepmom and her parents a wink and just keeps on going about his day. And I'm just like, what? I didn't know if I was in trouble or excited at the same time. It was just like all these mix of emotions. This is before like the nets were up and everything, of course.
Right.
So
Right.
But Tommy is a lifelong Dodger. I think the only time only different card he was part of was when he was with the Athletics, which I don't have. So if anyone has one, let me know.
Amazing. Well, I mean, Mr. Lasorda made an impression, right?
Oh yeah, and anytime I talk to him, or not talk to him, but anytime I say talk about him, I always say Mr. Lasorda. So it's stuck to me all these years later.
Fantastic. Curtis, great. Thank you. I think, Drew, we're back to you.
Okay. Well, George Shotgun Shuba is the next story I want to talk to you about. 1924, he was born in Youngstown, Ohio. And, some would consider Shuba to be a common, but give me a moment to change your mind. And here's George Shuba. So as a youngster, he hung a knotted string from a pipe in the basement and drilled a hole into it so that, and then into one of his baseball bats, and then he filled it with lead to make it heavier, and he would swing it repeatedly. And he developed such great bat speed by doing that. He swung a 44-ounce bat, he said, 600 times a night, 4,200 times a week, if you can believe that. But that really kind of helped him prepare for the major leagues, where he had the ability to spray the ball to all fields with powerful line drives. And that's where he got the nickname Shotgun. But he played minor league baseball down in Mobile, Alabama, where he gained at least one fan. Hank Aaron watched the Mobile Bears as a kid and once said, "My favorite on the team was a player named George Shotgun Shuba." Shuba made his major league debut with the Dodgers July 2nd back in 1948. And at the peak of his playing career, Shuba delivered a pinch hit home run in the 1953 World Series opener. He was the first National League player to hit a pinch hit home run in a World Series game. And Shuba's major league career ended on a high note with Brooklyn when they won the 1955 World Series. He played all 7 of his big league seasons with the Dodgers, which included 3 World Series appearances. Now, George Shuba is often remembered for his symbolic role in breaking down Major League Baseball's color barrier. While playing for the Dodgers minor league affiliate, the Montreal Royals, Shuba congratulated his teammate Jackie Robinson with a handshake as he crossed home plate in April of 1946. Robinson was hitting second with Shuba batting third that day. And he would hit so Robinson would hit his first home run with the Dodgers organization at that time. It was a glorious 3-run homer over the left field fence, and Shuba was waiting for him at home plate, where he offered his congratulatory handshake. And Alex has got that picture up. I appreciate you doing that. So he met Jackie at home plate, gave him the handshake, and it's said that it was become the first black player in modern organized baseball history when that event happened with the handshake. So giving congratulations to a home run hitter is common. It is today, and it was in those days. Robinson smiled as he touched home plate, and as you can see, and was greeted by him. And that picture was taken by the Associated Press. The portrait there was dubbed the handshake by the New York Times, and George Shotgun Shuba had noticed a display of disrespect by his teammates. So Shuba walked over to home plate and did the simple thing, the right thing, and shook his hand. So, Shuba grew up playing on the racially integrated teams in Youngstown, Ohio. And so, he was very familiar with African-American players, and he was friends with so many of them. He simply saw Robinson as a teammate and someone of his equal who deserved that respect. Now, the moment was described as the first interracial handshake, as I mentioned, in North American baseball's recent history. In 2019, it was announced that a 7-foot statue of the handshake would be placed in Shuba's hometown of Youngstown, Ohio. The statue entitled "The Handshake for the Century" was unveiled in April of 2021. Yeah, there you go. That was 75th anniversary of that gesture. George Shuba rarely wore his 1955 World Series ring. He wasn't a very sentimental man, but there was one exception. His son, Mike Shuba, told the New York Times that a picture framed and hanging above his favorite chair in the living room, it's a photo of him with Jackie Robinson in Jersey City, and it's been there for 40 years. George Shuba did not set out to convince anyone that he was not common. He was only trying to do the right thing, but I hope I changed your mind. He died in 2014 at the age of 89. He was the last living Dodger who appeared in the final game of the 1955 World Series. So, George Shuba.
Fantastic. Thank you. And because I had advance notice, I don't know what cards these guys are pulling, but I did know that Drew was going to show that card. So I pulled my Bowman color. Here he is, George Shuba again.
Very nice.
All right, Chris, we're on to you.
Well, I don't want to follow that. That might have been one of the coolest stories I've ever heard. Jeez. Okay, well, that's awesome. So I'm going to show you a card, and I can tell 5 different stories about this card, but I'm going to tell you one. Hopefully, you don't know. This, of course, is George Brett's rookie card, right? And I could tell you a story about my really good friend Mookie that gave me one of these cards, and at the National, and I just loved it. And if Mookie wants to give me another one, well, he could and should. But I also could tell you that I took 15 of these George Brett rookie cards and put it as a down payment for my wife's wedding ring, which is a pretty cool story all in itself.
Wow.
But this is a recent story over the last month that I heard, and I actually heard a clip of it. But the Kansas City Sports Commission and Founders Association, that's a long title. They hold a banquet and award ceremony every year, and they bring players, and I think they make up some awards too, just so they can get players in town. But it's not just Kansas City Royals or Chiefs players. They bring in who they think is the MVP that they vote on, and different things. Well, a couple of years ago, Mike Schmidt was brought in for some award, and so we have a big sports radio contingent for a small town like Kansas City. It's not a small town, but we have a few really powerful radio stations, and one of those is Sports Radio 810 WHB, and they emceed. So after this banquet that Mike Schmidt picked up some kind of award, he stayed, and they had this live interview with George Brett and Mike Schmidt. Now that's a pretty cool interview on a stage, and some of you may have seen this. But the story I want to tell about the George Brett card, I could have brought Mike Schmidt up, but there's probably too many Philly fans watching this anyway. But
I could kick you out, Chris.
And I'm not so sure Schmidt could talk complete sentences and that kind of stuff. But no, I truly believe Mike Schmidt's the greatest third baseman of all time. So But anyway, it was neat seeing these great Hall of Famers, great faces of baseball, and they both kind of were sharing the same story together. So I'm going to get some dates wrong, but heck, Don, Field of Dreams, thinks I'm making this up anyway, so it doesn't matter. But Mike Schmidt was drafted in 1971. He played for, I believe, for the University of Ohio, and he was in college. And so George Brett's a little bit younger than him. But they got a call from the same scout. Mike Schmidt in 1971 got a call from a scout, and George Brett got a call from a scout. Now, I want to preface this by saying I was born a Cincinnati Reds fan, and I still am to this day a little bit. And they had the Big Red Machine. And a scout in 1971 called Mike Schmidt and said, we're going to draft you number one. You're going to be the number one pick in the draft. That same scout called George Brett at his house and said, we're going to pick you number one in the 1971 draft. Well, they both were, a lot of people don't know this, but both of them were shortstops, okay? They were considered to be shortstops. And Mike Schmidt wanted to go to the Reds really, really bad. And George Brett was just wanting to get drafted, right? But they both were told they were going to be picked number one. Well, the first round goes by, and the Reds pick somebody that never played a minute in the major leagues. I wish I had his name because it makes the story more like Drew's, right? But anyway, in the second round, the Reds don't draft either one of them. And George Brett gets picked by the Royals, and then Mike Schmidt gets drafted the very next pick. So I think they went 14th and 15th in the second round, but somebody have to look that up to correct me. But as they were talking, they kind of broke down that Cincinnati Reds team and when they both would have been called to the major leagues. And they both just kind of thought about that team. And if we remember, the Cincinnati Reds moved Pete Rose to third base. Initially, he was supposed to be moved for Dan Dreesen, but George Foster had such a good spring they couldn't keep George Foster out of the lineup, right? But could you imagine? So they were talking about, Dave Concepcion. Hang on. They were talking about Dave Concepcion in 1971 being a light hitting shortstop. And they were just saying, could you imagine that lineup to the crowd with Pete Rose leading off and then Joe Morgan batting second, and then George Brett said, and me batting third, and Mike Schmidt said, no, and me batting third, and then with Johnny Bench and Tony Perez in that lineup, about how powerful that would be. And it was just fun hearing them banter back and forth. And George Brett at the end said, and after the top, he said, yeah, and I would have been the one playing shortstop. So, it's, to me, the story's funny because the same scout told each of them they were going to be drafted first, which I believe them saying that. And could you imagine a team that had George Brett and Mike Schmidt on it, along with Joe Morgan, Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, and Tony Perez? Crazy.
Yeah, that would be unbelievable. All right, good one, Chris. Rob, you're up.
Okay, well, as true to my channel name, Baseball Time Traveler, we're going to go back to the spring of 1981. And I'm in law school at this point, and I just finished a softball game with a bunch of my law school classmates, and we decided to start a fantasy baseball league. And that really started my second journey into card collecting, because I had been a collector as a kid back in the 60s, and I've documented that well. But we sat around, and it really kind of reignited my interest in baseball. And we had a great fun draft. We ended up doing that for 25, 30 years. I mean, I stopped doing it when the steroid era really was in full swing in the early 2000s. I just said, I can't pick anybody because I don't know who's going to hit 55 home runs this year. So anyway, what I did back then, I started collecting again. And I was acquiring all the classic, the rookie cards at the time, the Ripkins, the Gwynns, the Sandbergs, the Boggs, all that. But I also had this, my history interest had long been there. And I said, well, how am I going to get some of these older cards? Well, we didn't have the internet. There was no such thing as eBay, none of that stuff. And I really didn't have a bunch of cash to buy, the T206s back then, even though they were probably $20. $20 to me at that time was a lot of money. So what I did, I went the cheap way and I bought a set of cards that I think the entire set was 55 cards. It were colorized versions of what looked to be, the old timers, guys long retired. And one card that I got, and of those 55, I sent 5 or 6 off to get autographed through the mail. And back then, most of the people didn't charge money. And so I sent it to a guy named Joe DiMaggio in San Francisco. And he was kind enough to send it back, and I've held it ever since. Okay.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. And it's a card I've always cherished, and I've got several other of those cards in that set. But fast forward now to 2024. And, as I re-entered the hobby 2 or 3 years ago, I started to gain knowledge, and I started going, wait a minute, that is a colorized version of the 1939 play ball Joe DiMaggio.
Right.
So that kind of spurred my interest in exploring that set of cards. And if you look on the screen here, I've got some of my Hall of Famers up there. But what I did over the last year or so was to try and acquire the Yankees team group in that set. There were 11 cards in that particular set. And Joe DiMaggio was kind of the grail card of that set for me. Sure. And my plan was to go to Cleveland and look for that card and do my best to acquire it. Well, my plans kind of went sideways at Cleveland, to put it mildly. And I had to change plans pretty drastically. So that never happened in Cleveland. But fast forward to about a month ago, and I was able to, through a little bit of, I guess, intervention, whatever you want to call it, divine intervention. But I was able to acquire the 1939 play ball Joe DiMaggio.
Wow. And
it's a special card for me. One, because it's one that I really had to take a chance on. It's a 5. It's a uniform number. It's as well centered as I've ever seen that particular card. And it's a cherished card for me because it holds a special meaning because it brings me back to Cleveland, which was a very difficult time for me. And I just saw Stephen Pete with a PH come up on the screen there, and he was a good buddy to me at a very tough time, and I appreciate that. So Anyway, that's the card, and that's the story, and this one will always be with me.
That's such a beautiful story, Rob, and I love that it's not just the card itself, but that it has that memory for you of that original card that you picked up back in the day, and it's got this nice sort of like life story to it that kind of spans a lot of time. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Great journey.
Great. Curtis,
you're up. So I have 2. I'm going to show you one. We all know this type of card and everything, but it's 58 Peewee Reese.
All right. Yes.
I had this card for a while. I was able to get an original photo to match it, which was great. It's meaningful because this is probably one of the first photos, for the LA Dodgers, not Brooklyn.
Right.
They moved in 58. So I had this, and I am active duty military, and I transferred last summer from Portland, Oregon to the Washington, D.C. area. And on my time in Oregon, I met a great group of folks there who also are collectors. One of them is Floating Heads. I used to go out to lunch and meet up with him in Portland and buy some stuff off him, and we used to hang out quite a bit. And And that's how great this community is. You know, I'm so worried about moving my family across the country, you know, sending my wife and my 2 little ones to the in-laws in upstate New York while I drive across country. So collecting cards were like nowhere on my mind, but I've been wanting the trifecta of getting the one with the tab.
Wow.
Let me see if I can get it without the reflection. Yeah. So, so it's a 5, and I was literally, I want to say, probably on my tail end of a like 6-day drive over here, and just trying to deal with movers and everything. But he hit me up and it's like, "Hey, this is available." I was like, "I barely don't even have a house." So I'm like, who can I contact? Luckily enough, I have people that live out this way. So I was like, "Hey, can I use your address?" And they're like, "Sure, man, use my address." So I was able to get that and get the trifecta of the one without the tab and one with the tab. But it's just this community in general, not just in YouTube folks, but Instagram and just collectors in general. They're just, you know, once you get to know someone, they go out of your way to make you feel special and always be on the lookout for things that you want. And I can't thank Floating Heads enough. You know, I have many of my things in my collection from him. But just in general, this community in general is just absolutely amazing.
Absolutely. Everybody's got an eye out for people. And I love that not only do you have that card, but you have the memory of like that transitional point in your life and like moving in and like there's other stuff associated with that card. By the way, Curtis, I told you it was going to happen. You're getting all sorts of messages. You need to start a channel. You got some fans in here. Great to see everybody supporting you here. All right, guys, we got 15 minutes, so let's call this a lightning round. Let's see if we can get through one more round of cards. Drew.
Yeah. So I do not have a connection to the card, but I do have a connection to the man. He was friends of our family for many years. He grew up in Weston, Nebraska, population of 250 people back in 1925. And I know I've told you this before, Alex, but his name is, well, people pronounce it Cerv, but it's actually pronounced Cerv. And
that's right.
But for tonight, I'll say Cerv, so everybody knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, so back when he was 11 or 12 years old, he and his father drove a truck to New York to deliver eggs and milk, and they took a couple games in there at Yankee Stadium. And after watching Lou Gehrig get 2 home runs, he told his dad, "Hey, I'm going to play for the Yankees one day." So, you know, like most of his generation during World War II, he raised his hand and said, "Hey, where do I sign up?" And he joined the Navy at age 18. He was assigned as a radar man aboard the destroyer Claxton in the Pacific. He escaped injury in several kamikaze attacks during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. I hope I pronounced that right. And which I understand was the largest naval engagement of the war. A number of sailors were killed from suicide attacks. And when the ship returned home, President Truman presented the destroyer with a Presidential Unit Citation. Before leaving, President Truman shook his hand and told him that, "Hey, my door will always be open to you." The two formed a friendship, and Cerv would often go down to Missouri and visit Truman. And on occasion, President Truman would find his way up to Nebraska to visit with Bob. One evening in Kansas City, they were having Bob Cerv night, and President Truman showed up, and people were kind of surprised, and they asked, "Hey, you know, why are you here?" He said, Truman explained that if Cerv was being honored for something, then he needed to be there. Cerv enrolled in the University of Nebraska in 1946 under the GI Bill. He's the only Cornhusker to earn 4 letters in each basketball and baseball, and he was Nebraska's first baseball All-American. Maris and Cerv, Roger Maris and Cerv were roommates in New York in 1961, and it was suggested that Mantle move in with them. And I've been told that the Yankee brass wanted Cerv to keep them out of trouble during that home run chase. And so Cerv agreed. He was pretty reluctant at first, but he said, "Okay, but these are the rules. If you're going to break them, you're out of here. No partying, no girls." And he went on to say that he was kind of a father figure. I remember him talking about this. He did all the shopping and the cooking and kind of ran the place, I guess, and spent a lot of nights just sitting back in the living room watching TV. But Mantle kind of was stuck in that quiet domestic life until around Labor Day, and then he said, "Hey, I've had enough of this. I got to go out and have a good time." So you'll if you ever watch the movie 61, Bob Cerv is portrayed in that movie. He did go on to manage in college. A few players that he managed were Mike Moore, Ron Guidry, Mike Hargrove, Rick Honeycutt, and Doug Drabeck. One of my family members once asked him what he was most proud of, and he said, "Hey, I got all 10 of my kids through college." Bob died back in April of 2017, and when I was younger, I had so many opportunities to sit down with him, and I was a stupid kid, and I passed up those opportunities. It's one of my greatest regrets. And so, if you ever get an opportunity to sit down, with somebody like him or any war veteran, just give them the time. There's an opportunity to learn something.
Right. Absolutely. Bob Cerv, right?
Cerv.
All right, Chris.
It's going to be quick, I promise. So here's a picture of Satchel Paige rookie card right
Ooh,
here.
beautiful.
Right? Yes. Okay. So you're going to have to do the math on this to see how old he is. But in 1986, I was enrolled in college at Missouri Valley College, which I called the Harvard of the Midwest. Don Field of Dreams could not have gotten in that college because he couldn't have passed any test to get in there. But Satchel Paige's son was enrolled in that college, and he had the coaches convinced that he was a baseball player. He's a very flamboyant kind of guy. He ended up being in the drama program, but in '86 they let him come out for fall baseball because, heck, if your dad's Satchel Paige and you don't let him come out for baseball and he's really good, you look stupid. Also on that same year, Ron Hunt, second baseman for the Chicago Cubs, nicknamed the Penguin before Ron Say was, but Ron Hunt was known for getting hit by a pitch. Matter of fact, when he retired, he held the record for being hit by a pitch. Matter of fact, he got hit 3 times in one game. At that time, it had hardly happened before. So in fall baseball and NAI back in the day, the coaches could not be there for fall practices, only in the spring. And so a few of us led the practice. I was catching. We bring in Satchel Paige's son, and I wish I knew his name. I don't, because he did not make the team. But he warmed up in the bullpen, came out to pitch in a batting practice, live kind of game kind of thing. Ron Hunt's son comes up to bat, and I kid you not, very first pitch, Ron Hunt gets hit by a pitch from Satchel Paige's son. That I would not have believed it had I not seen it. And neither one of them stuck around very long, or neither one of them stuck around on the baseball team very long. But I got to witness Satchel Paige's son
there
hitting Ron Hunt.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you, Chris. All right, Rob.
Oh, that's tough to follow up. How's that for a leader card?
Oh, wow.
All right, so that's just a photograph, obviously, of an artistic rendition, but I just wanted to make sure I got that online since we're running short on time. That's a tough story to follow up, Chris, but I'm just going to give more of another personal story. Kind of my start, my first cards that I was collecting as a kid. I used to stand outside the they used to call them 5 and dimes back then. And this was 1964, and I had indicated that 65 was my first year in Little League. Well, I had been sitting around watching baseball games with my grandfather and my dad, and I was a Willie Mays fan because my grandfather was a big New York Giants fan, and they had just moved out to the West Coast in the late 50s, obviously. And This was now the mid 60s. And my first card that I remember pulling out of a pack, this is just an example of it, but it's the old Willie Mays.
Yeah.
And I would play with these. I mean, you know the stories. I mean, we played with these cards, we'd flip for them. We'd play closest to the wall. These were playing cards, not trade, and trading cards, not things that you stick in a plastic binder and hold on for 20 years.
Right.
But what happened was in my second year of Little League, I was drafted by the Yankees, and I was assigned number 7 of all numbers. And I used to trade away my Willie Mays cards and get rid of these. And as soon as I got that number 7, I go, wait a minute, that's Mickey Mantle. He's not going to be leaving my possession any longer either. So these 2 cards meant a lot to me in my Little League days for sure. And, I was personally a little disappointed with Willie's card when I first saw that one. I go, he didn't even look at the camera. But, my favorite Willie Mays card, I think, is the 66. I really like that one. And but I wanted to show the first 2 that were really part of my beginning of my collecting journey.
Fantastic. Great. Rob, thank you for sharing that. All right, Curtis, take us home.
All right. Well, since, I am more of being on Instagram, I'm going off what you posted recently of your book that you got.
Oh, yeah.
With this beautiful.
Oh, boy, yes.
Christy Mathewson. So, we all know about Mathewson, what his accomplishments are and everything, but the centerpiece and the guy on the right, Arthur Fletcher, he's a 9-time World Series champ with the Yankees, as a coach during Murderers Row,
That's
so
right.
I mean, just because he didn't make it, in the big leagues, for very long doesn't mean that you're not a bad ball player. You just didn't have the skill set, but you got the knowledge, and being a coach for the Yankees, is quite remarkable to say the least. And the other one was Devlin, who hit his first career at bat, hit a grand slam, and every year after that, he only hit 1 home run each season that he played in. But he is forever remembered being part of the Chris Mathewson card.
Absolutely. And here we are talking about him. So, it's not so bad after all.
Exactly.
Even though he's not Christy Mathewson. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we made it with a little bit of time to spare. So thanks for joining in, everybody. Obviously at 9:00 here in a few minutes, you should head over to 4 Collectors for the next live stream. As always on a Sunday night, there's a lot of stuff going on. Thanks for joining in, everybody. If you enjoyed this live stream about nothing, give it a thumbs up and make your voice heard. If you didn't like it, I'm not sure what you stayed around for all this time. But if you want to get in touch or have ideas for future sessions, you can email me at bowman53channel@gmail.com. I want to say thanks to Drew, Chris, Curtis, and Rob. Thanks, guys, for your time and your cards and your stories. Really appreciate it. And it was nice this time just getting to sit back and watch the cards come up and all the stories.
Yeah.
So appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. If anybody's not following these guys, 3 of these guys have a YouTube channel. 1 of these guys is on Instagram. Maybe he'll have a YouTube channel someday. We'll see. So you should definitely look these guys up.
Hey, Curtis, it's not hard. It's not hard. Jason, Everyday Card Collector, has a YouTube channel, for Pete's sake.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
The razzing continues. Well, take care of yourselves out there, everybody in Hobbyland. Remember to take time, be patient, and enjoy what you've got. See you all next Sunday night. Have a great night, everybody.
Have a good one, guys.